Welcome back to another episode of Monday ReTsene with Pretoria Psychologists. Today we tackle the topic of grief and children. And grief is an inevitable part of life. It means that in life that we experience loss, it's going to be there at all times, right? But when our children experience loss, that can be something extremely overwhelming for our children. And they can experience this in many ways. The loss of a best friend, their loss of a sibling, a loss of a parent, a loss of a grandparent. And given that we've just come out of the COVID pandemic, we may still be dealing with grief and the loss of our significant loved ones. So what's important to note is that with children in grief, we cannot protect them from the pain of the loss. But what we can do is provide a safe space for them to express themselves, but also for them to be able to process their grief. Mourning is a completely normal part of the healing process, and we need to be in tune with our children's emotions to ensure that we are helping them as best we can. Now, the first thing to note is that children grieve very differently. Children may, for example, be really sad, or maybe perhaps even display anger towards the person that has departed. They may actually even feel emotions of guilt. Maybe they didn't do so well in a test, and that's what they're associating to the fact that this person has passed away and is no longer with us. They may actually be sad the one moment and then start playing the next moment. That doesn't mean that they have concluded their grieving process. It just means that they're using play as a buffer to ensure that they aren't overwhelmed by the entire situation. In younger children, we may actually see something that we call regression, which is when children who are able to control their bowels and who are potty-trained may actually regress and end up, bedwetting or talking like a baby. This is just their response to the trauma and the grief. Now, how do we start the conversation about telling our children that somebody they love has passed away? So a good conversation starter perhaps could even be a book surrounding the narration of death, right? That allows for questions to be asked. And something I've noted when working with children with grief is that we have to be as direct and honest as possible. We can't say to them that somebody has gone to sleep for a long time, because what that does is their brains don't have the ability to process that information in terms of what we're actually saying. So they may perhaps be afraid to go to sleep. They may actually then not want to sleep with the fear of them also going to sleep for a long time. So we have to be able to say that somebody has passed away, that, this person is with God, they're in heaven, and so that they understand what has happened. Now, with children, it becomes important to note that the permanency of death may not be something that they understand. And so we may have to remind them continuously as they grieve, remember so-and-so is not coming back, right? They may feel as though if they are a really good child, if they do all their chores, if they do well at school, this person will come back. It is not dependent on the child's performance, and we may need to remind them of that. It becomes really, really important to ask the question of how is my grief impacting that of the child's process? Because if your child's going through grief, you as well are going through grief, and you need to be mindful about how you model behavior. Are you explosive? Are you angry? Are you expressive? All of these are ways in which children learn to handle their emotions. So it becomes really important for you to be cognizant about your own grief through this process. Now, a question that I often have to deal with by parents is, do I let my child attend a funeral? And this is a very personal decision, first and foremost. But what I can suggest is that it becomes really important to prepare your child if they are going to attend a funeral. It can be really, really overwhelming to go to a funeral, to see all of the emotions that are being displayed, whether it be sorrow or anger. Lots of people are crying. There's a casket with a body in it. And so it becomes really important to adequately prepare them for what they may be exposed to in terms of the environment. Now, in saying that, the most prepared child may even still be overwhelmed by the situation, because it is extremely overwhelming to be faced with so much emotion at that time. Now, for example, you may also suggest or even decide that going to the funeral is not, appropriate for this child or your child. And so what happens if they don't attend the funeral? They are really going to need a process of closure, something that ignites closure. Whether that may be going to the gravesite to visit them and plant flowers, or the release of balloons with love messages on them. It really becomes important that your child is exposed to closure, to being able to say what they never did say. And this could happen through stories, through coloring, and really just being mindful. Sometimes kids struggle to express their feelings, but they express so much to us in ways that they can, such as play and drawing and storytelling. And so it really becomes important that we are present, but that if they've got questions, we answer them directly, right? Now, one thing I want to assure you of is that no matter what question gets thrown your way, it's okay not to have the answers to everything. What is important is that you are there to provide a safe space. The last thing I want to chat to you guys about today is, how do you know if you need to seek professional help? How do you know if there's a serious problem? How do you know if there is something that needs to be addressed? So often some of the warning signs that we look at is, a change of behavior, anger outbursts, tantrums, change of sleeping patterns or eating patterns, a lack of concentration at school. For, a long time, there may be disruptions in their day-to-day life. And it becomes important for you to ascertain that if this is to the extreme or something that you are concerned about, that you are able to then, make contact with your nearest healthcare professional or psychologist and see how we can better support your child through the loss of a loved one. I think with the general gist of this video, it's more about how do we engage in conversation with kids around death, because that can be so daunting rather. And so I think what needs to happen is there needs to be constant support, presence, and love, and the constant reminder that, little by little, we will let go of the loss, but never of the love. And that's really important. That could be a parting message, so I'll repeat that little by little, we learn to let go of the loss, but not of the love. And that's important when dealing with the loss of a loved one, especially for children. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Monday ReTsene, and we'll see you next week.